Now we turn from communicating from the heart to an industry that's had its fair share of communication issues. I'm talking about the CBD and hemp sector here in the UK. Many people are still confused about CBD as a product and how it relates to hemp, and the legislators and regulators don't appear to be making things easy either for an industry that has a huge number of benefits for health, the environment and sustainability. Kyle Esplin is the chair of the Scottish Hemp Association that's campaigning for fair regulation within the hemp industry. He's a professional musician by trade, so when I caught up with him the other day, I asked him to start off with how he got into the hemp and CBD business.
Hi JJ, it's a pleasure to be here on the show with you. So how I ended up in the CBD and hemp industry. My background has been in the music and entertainment industry. It's been my whole life. My parents were in the music business. It's been the only work I've ever done until I was traveling the world, having a good time. And I was struck by a respiratory viral infection in 2012, which knocked me out of action. Spent about 8 months bedbound and housebound, and was over 2 years before I was able to get back into work. I was left with a long-term post-viral fatigue syndrome.
Wow.
And there was no solution from the doctors or the medical system here for the situation. So I traveled over to Holland. I went to a clinic. I went to get hold of some hemp and cannabis oils, and this was the very early days of these kind of being available, and they changed my life. I was able to get back to functioning. I got back into the music industry, and I started a CBD company. My current brand's Holistic Highland Hemp that I run, and I was doing that along with traveling in the music industry. But after everything got completely shut down with the COVID lockdown, there's not been the opportunity to be doing any music at all, as it was being half and half. So due to some other pressing issues for the hemp industry that's come up just now, of novel foods regulation being introduced, we have sort of synthetic CBD entering the food chain, all sorts of changes that I don't see as moving completely in the right direction, considering I've been involved in the hemp industry since 2013. I've seen how it's progressed and the various sort of issues it's come up for a fledgling growing industry. But the direction it's come to now appears to be heading for too much red tape, unnecessary regulation, and not the type of progress you would see for moving forward in the future for consumers and the industry. So last summer, not long after the lockdown started, Scottish companies had been meeting loosely for a while and plans to form the Scottish Hemp Association. And in August last year, we officially registered. I put myself forward to be the chair. And from there, I opened up communications with Food Standards Scotland to try and improve the regulation in Scotland going forward for the industry and consumer. So that was my process of how I went from being in the music to now communicating with the government officials.
Yeah, which is quite a story, but it's brilliant that you actually found benefit in using hemp and cannabis products. I've also, hands up, full disclosure, I've also found a benefit in using CBD and take it regularly actually as a way of maintaining my health, because it as I understand, helps your body come into balance. It helps everything regulate properly in your body. And I have found it incredible over the last few years that I've been using it. But I use, as far as possible, an organic product, because that's where I'm coming from with everything, is as organic as possible, as natural as possible. But one of the issues coming into the industry now, and we'll talk a little bit about the regulation as far as drugs are concerned, because I know a lot of people are still concerned that CBD is a drug. But one of the issues coming into the industry now is synthetics, as you just mentioned briefly there. Mm-hmm. What is the issue with that? What's going on with that?
So what's happened is we always feel there's been various attempts to interrupt the industry one way or another as it's been developing. And if we go back to 2016 in November, there was the headlines at the time where CBD products were going to be removed from the shelves within 28 days because the MHRA, the Medicines Health Regulatory Authority, deemed these products to not be food supplements and they were going to be removed from the market. Well, the industry made the case that clearly these were food supplements. They're just being sold as a food supplement, as other things could be in the health shop, and they were allowed to remain on the market. And then a short time later, the next change was that novel foods regulation was going to be applied to these products. And this was a European-wide sort of recommendation. It's not a legally binding till a country actually takes it upon themselves to do it. It was a European-wide recommendation, where they said that these type of hemp oils containing CBD and hemp extracts don't have a history of human consumption and need to be treated as a brand new product and put through animal testing, and it costs about £250,000 to test one single product before it can be on the market. And if you were to take the same CBD oil and say you want to put that CBD oil into a honey now, you need to start the animal testing again and another £250,000 trials to get that honey approved with the same CBD oil mixed in as you just tested.
But that's just not true. That's just not the case, is it?
Exactly. So where they're splitting the line, we feel splitting the line very unfairly and unreasonably. The issue is the hemp oils contain a hemp extract. It's extracted from the plant using a CO2 extraction method. This is the same as like how you would get coffee, for example, in that concentration. Yeah. So it's a food safe method that's been used in Europe since 1988. Because CBD didn't enter the European market widespread until sort of 2013, the Novel Foods Regulation states that if a product wasn't on the market prior to 1997 in its composition as it is, it's considered a brand new food and has to go through these trials. Now, usually an ingredient, another example would be stevia, the sweetener, for example. When that was deemed a novel food, once that was tested and proved safe, it could be used in any other product after that. So one round of animal testing and all the things to be done, and that was the ingredient proven safe, and it could be used in bakery and everything after that. CBD is being designated with a more extreme version of novel foods where every single slight formula variation needs all the testing done again. So if you want to have a CBD oil which contains your hemp extract mixed in with hemp seed oil, but somebody maybe wants to have the hemp extract mixed in with MCT oil, this is two different £250,000 trials to prove that they're both safe for consumption.
And just to say what MCT oil is, it's often found in the ingredients on CBD oil bottles. Just explain what that is.
Sure, it's a fractionated coconut oil. It's just a purified sort of coconut oil. Usually it's from coconut. It's a carrier oil. It's the hemp extract when it comes from the plant. It's a very sort of thick, quite sort of sticky, resinous substance. And that gets diluted into a carrier oil, whether it's hemp seed oil or MCT oil, down to 10-part concentration or so.
Yeah. So these rather draconian rules are being pushed through, or they're trying to push through these rules, which seems a bit daft to me, since hemp's been around since time immemorial, and we've had hemp in our diets and our animal feed diets since time immemorial. It seems like quite weird. And the farming regulations here in the UK are very different to Europe, for instance.
Sure. So in the UK, farmers can get a license to grow hemp, which is a drawn out process to get the license, and prove the field is in a reasonable place, make sure they get the license in time to buy the seed and get it grown. And after they have a nice crop ready in the field, all of the leaves and flowers have to be left to degrade into the soil. They're only allowed to use the seed and the stem and the stalk from the plant. That's it. The flower and the leaf, the most valuable part, has to be left to degrade in the soil, and our hemp regulations have not been updated. So all of the CBD on the UK market is supplied by Europe or America, because our farmers are not allowed to extract the CBD from the hemp they grow in the UK.
Which sounds a bit crazy.
It's very crazy. It's the most valuable part of the plant, and it's got to be just plowed into the field and left. It's not allowed to actually leave the area of the field it's designated to be grown on. So after we've had the communications with Food Standards Scotland about the food angle, but I've also reached out to the rest of the UK industry about the current situation we're all facing, and we had a meeting with the Home Office recently as well, the Drugs and Firearms Department, which is responsible for hemp farming licenses. So
Right. Yeah.
we were working on a new paper with Professor Mike Barnes, which is coming out with a lot more sensible recommendations for the future of both the medical cannabis industry, which is separate in the UK, but also the hemp and CBD industry. He has a new paper, and the Scottish Hemp Association played a large part in the recommendations for the going forward for hemp plans. And this includes the farmers are limited to growing 0.2% THC varieties, which is your standard sort of industrial hemp varieties used for stem and stalk only. In other countries like Switzerland, they've raised the limit up to 1% THC, and that's going to be a future international standard. America is currently on 0.3 or 0.5, but they're also asking for 1%. And this opens up a diverse range of new hemp genetics, which can be grown, which will be a lot more valuable to the farmer, to the community, and the consumer down the line as well. And
yeah, no, that's interesting. And now maybe here's a good time to just talk about the drug element, because the THC element is the psychoactive element, isn't it, in the hemp plant? And that's what people smoke to get high, right? That's what gets you high.
So the typical high THC varieties that would be on the street will be around 20% THC, and that's what people are smoking to get high. Hemp varieties are classes of 1% THC and below. They're non-psychoactive at that level. So there's no intoxication or psychoactivity that's associated with cannabis use like that.
Yeah, because there's still a great deal of confusion, I think, amongst the public when it comes to cannabis or CBD, because I know certainly older people who may just see the word cannabis think immediately of drugs. And of course, it used to be a common crop, didn't it?
Oh yeah, I mean, hemp was grown in Scotland for close to 1,000 years. It was around 1100 or so it turned up, and it was very popular. And right up until the 1800s, it was being grown widespread across Scotland. There's even some areas and settlements that have hemp in the name, named after the hemp fields they used to be growing. And that all just sort of disappeared with one issue after another, sort of thing.
Yeah, and the hemp isn't just used for extracting the oil, the CBD oil. Hemp is a fantastically valuable crop for other reasons as well.
Oh yeah, sure. Its textile use, the environmental benefits it's the best. I don't think there's a plant that has any better environmental benefits across the board for carbon removal, soil remediation as a very deep taproot. So when you grow any other crop the year after you've grown hemp, whether it's just your potatoes, carrots, blueberries, whatever's in the ground, will have a higher yield the year following hemp because of the deep taproot and soil remediation properties the plant brings. And under the current licensing restrictions, which farmers can't currently grow for the CBD extraction, but they can grow for making hemp seed oil, hemp protein powder, and textile use. Now, on the seed oil and seed protein powder, there has been the issues of sort of the restrictiveness to get the license and grow the plants and the competition from imports, of course. But we've been working with farmers here this year, and we have around 10 farmers in Angus and Aberdeenshire who are starting to grow hemp this year. So that's going to be for a hemp seed oil crop. And we would really like to get on to do the industrial use of it here in Scotland with the textile use. It's a fantastic insulation for housing, fantastic textile for clothes and material. There's all sorts of use, but we need decortication facilities close by. And because there hasn't been the demand of the hemp field, we don't have the facility to process the stem and stalk into the usable textile. And it's currently not cost effective to try and ship it down to England to the process and then ship the end result back up. So we are looking at that, and there is investment interested. So farmers are working on a food crop this year, but as soon as we get the investment in the facility in place for decortication, we'll be looking to do textiles, insulation, raw materials, as well as a bioplastic. And there's even for energy use as a graphene replacement, a supercapacitor energy storage can be made from
Wow.
hemp shiv.
It does so much, and it's incredibly environmentally friendly.
Yeah, sure. I mean, back in sort of 1940s, it was all being spoken about as the $1 billion crop at the time, and it was grown en masse to make the textiles for all the sails and rope at the time of the war. And then after that, with various prohibition, regulation, and that, it just all sort of disappeared. And we were trying to revive that and bring it back. Also for the environment, there's been studies done in Colorado where, since they've upped their hemp plantations, on the biodiversity studies, they found species of bees in the hemp fields that are not in any of the other neighboring crops. And it's just the hemp that we want to be there. And there's been another study from the Czech Republic where, if the bees had access to hemp fields, around 30% more survived the winter period compared to when they didn't have hemp. And that's thought to be both a late season source of nutrition, but also likely some sort of health benefits for the bee, with all the various issues they've been facing, getting hammered from issues out there in the environment. So hemp it's a win-win to get hemp on board, whether you're for CBD or whether you're slightly concerned of what's been the stigma of hemp before. There's all the reasons to get on board and for Scotland to start leading the way and grow hemp, and that's what we're working on.
Yeah, but it must be difficult to, in some people's minds, separate this demonization of a plant from what it actually is or can be.
Well, some people take on new information at a faster rate than others. It's only an education based. There's no opinion based to this. There's education and information. You either know the details or you don't. And if you look into all the details, the case is there. And although there was some, I would say, unnecessary negative press towards the CBD industry over the last couple of years, generally about, the concerns of the connections to cannabis or any trace THC, it was very out of context for the consumer. And for example, hemp seed oil entered the food market in the sort of late 90s, and it's been on the market with no issue there. And it has the same total trace amount of THC sort of in there as you would find in these CBD products. Now the bottle's larger, but people are only consuming it proportion wise. So it really isn't an issue, and that was never explained to the public in the consumer context. There was headlines that were sort of made against the industry, and even the way it's been pushed forward for this novel food regulation, to say that, well, here's one example of something we weren't happy about, so we have to do all this new red tape. It's just not required, because the food regulation is in place to deal with the CBD industry. If something is not correct with the labeling, that's covered. If there's something that shouldn't be in the product, that's covered. It's just it's been a growing industry, and that's like why associations like yourself, the Scottish Hemp Association, has turned up to work with the industry and to work with the regulators. So we meet regular with Food Standards Scotland to discuss the issue and these transitions of these products, and how these products are viewed, and what's the cutoff point between what is a novel food and what isn't. There's no clear explanation of this. So the industry across the board does. It's not the industry, it's the rules of the country need to be upgraded to accommodate in a sensible way. So that's what we're working on.
And I think that's really fantastic, because it seems to me, listening to you just now, this is a plant which we have lost our connection with, a plant that we used for everything over thousands of years. And a lot of people have said, since I've been looking into CBD and hemp over the last few years, a lot of people say to me, well, one of the reasons maybe why we are suffering so many issues with our health these days is because we don't get the phytocannabinoids, that's the plant cannabinoids, into our bodies from what we eat. Because in the past, if you ate meat, let's say, it quite possibly had been fed some hemp, and you would get the cannabinoids through that way as well. Because our bodies also make cannabinoids. They are something that exist within us. Well, but some of us are deficient.
That's the amazing thing, how the endocannabinoid system, which is what the compounds in the cannabis plant work on in the body, and the health benefits of CBD oil, let's say, come from. It was only discovered after doing research on sort of what were the activity of cannabis in the human body. And on studying that, they found the largest G protein coupled receptor network in the body. The brain has more cannabinoid receptors than there is serotonin and dopamine combined. And the average GP has only heard about it recently thanks to the CBD oil industry. It was discovered in the late 1980s, and they don't get taught about this in medical school. And it's not covered in medical school. It's the largest neurotransmitter network in the body. It's involved in all processes from conception until death, and it's been overlooked. So that explains a lot of the benefits. And the cannabis plant is the only plant in nature which produces any significant amount of compounds called cannabinoids, which activate this receptor system in our body. Our brain produces chemical compounds which are structurally almost identical to the compounds in cannabis and hemp, which activate the receptor network. And that's how topping up with phytocannabinoids has the benefits.
A lot of people may unwittingly be deficient, and if they took something like a CBD oil, it might help them. Although it has to be said, from what I understand, each one of us would have an individual ideal dosage of CBD, because we're all very, very different. Our bodies are very different, and our needs are very different. So again, it's not a one size fits all medicine, although I know I can't use the word medicine in terms of CBD because it is just a food supplement, technically speaking. But it just seems to be this extraordinarily beneficial plant in every way, and we're keeping it from the public.
Yeah, it's
not
very
only the
strange
public,
when you look
but the
into detail.
bees.
Sure, and from the bees, I know the bees are wanting it as well. They just can't speak out for it, so we're fighting for the bees also. This is also the reason why we brought up the issue about synthetic CBD entering the food supply, and we've spoken about this with Food Standards Scotland in the Home Office. We started a bit of a campaign across the UK collecting data from consumers, and the initial data from consumers in Scotland was that close to 90% of consumers were not comfortable with synthetic entering the food supply, and more than 90% would support our proposal that if a product contains synthetic, it should state that on the label, because after that 31st of March 2021 deadline which just passed, which was set by the FSA, which applies to England and Wales, but not to Scotland, although it's kind of connected, synthetic CBD could enter the food supply, and a product could say contains 500 milligram, and you won't know if it's come from the plant or not. And due to all the benefits that this plant can offer, we don't want this to be the next thing that's going to, let's say, interrupt it coming back, because obviously the farmers want to get on board. They would like to grow CBD. They want the benefits. They've heard about the industry and the economy. They want to be involved. We don't want to just have that set up and then find out that what's grown in warehouses or laboratories of synthetic compounds floods the market at a cheap price, and all of a sudden there's less demand for plant-based, and then all the environmental benefits would also be reduced. So from an ethical standpoint, consumers should have the right to know what they're buying and what they're putting in their body. We understand all products will go through this novel food testing process, but it comes back to our initial issue of what we deal with is hemp extracts. That should be considered separate from single compound CBD, which is what synthetic or isolated CBD is. It's like the difference between orange juice and vitamin C. Orange juice contains vitamin C, but it is not vitamin C. That's what we're dealing with the hemp industry at the moment.
Absolutely. And it reminds me of something I was told about aspirin, because aspirin is a compound that is naturally found in meadowsweet. We've all maybe seen meadowsweet growing on the roadsides and verges. The aspirin, the salicylic acid on its own, can be quite harmful to some people. It can be harmful to stomach linings. You know, if you have an ulcer, you're not recommended to take aspirin. But apparently the meadowsweet plant has other compounds in it that mitigate against that damaging effect. So, you know, when we take a compound, an active compound from the whole as it exists in a plant, we're doing ourselves a disservice.
For sure. And consumers, they prefer whole plant hemp extract that contains CBD by the majority. We've done surveys, collected data on this. The majority prefer hemp extract with CBD compared to single compound isolated or synthetic CBD. But if they don't have the knowledge, the information, or have this on the product label, then they may not get the product they're looking for, or the one they've heard about, for example.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming onto the show and talking to me about this. I wish you every success, because I, for one, will be rooting for us having the choice of naturally grown hemp oil that comes from a plant that was in a field and not a laboratory. It just seems fantastic that hemp really is one of those plants that has a benefit for the whole, and hopefully we'll see some changes in the industry very soon.
Thanks,
so Kyle,
Tracy.
thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd just like to say our mankind's had a co-evolutionary symbiotic relationship with this plant, and we can't wait to reintroduce it to society. Thanks for having me.
Kyle Esplin doing a great job there. Find out more on Instagram and Twitter at Hemp Scotland. And you can also check out the Facebook page Full Spectrum Scotland.